Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am Tamara Johnson. Sheely, good morning. It is a beautiful sunny morning here in Georgia. It is Saturday, July 31st. OMG, I just can't believe how this year is flying by. And we're about to get this conversation started. So this morning, y'all, I have been so anxious to talk about this subject for quite a while. We're going to talk about food and Black farming. And I have a co-host with me, Mr. Eric. Good morning.
Hey, Tamara, how's it going?
It is coming along, sir. Thank you for joining me. For those of you who don't know Mr. Eric, y'all, he is a fellow reparationist. He and I have been on this journey for quite a number of years now, fighting for those of us who are descendants of chattel slavery in this country. So thank you, Eric, for joining me. Eric is a farmer. He is the leader of the West Georgia Farmers Cooperative. Eric, welcome to the broadcast.
Glad to be here. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You know, food and farming, it is so close to my heart. I think I keep getting some back feed, Eric. You have a phone or something?
No, everything's quiet here.
Okay. I don't know where it is. Maybe it'll go away. But you know, food and farming is close to my heart. I'm from rural Georgia, like you are in rural Georgia. And, you know, when I was a little girl, Eric, you know, I tell this story that we didn't have potato chips and soda and, you know, that wasn't, you know, cookies. That wasn't my snack. My snack, Eric, was to go outside and whatever was growing in the yard, that's what we ate. Like, I remember the plums, the figs, whatever was growing in the yard is what we ate. I remember shelling peas with my grandmother. Like, yeah, look, you got some right there. Delicious. Oh, I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous. OMG, because this is like they're when they're ripe. Oh my gosh. I remember shelling peas with my grandmother. I remember the small farm that my grandmother and her brother had, where all of our vegetables came from this farm, like from this garden. That it was like every year they were in this garden, and that's where that was our food. Like, so I do believe that food is medicine. My grandmother was able to do magic with food, like, you know, whether she in her refrigerator, Eric, she used to keep, and I still don't know what this is to this day, and I'm trying to get my aunt to tell me what this is. It was in a jar, it was lemons, and it had something else in it. I don't know what else was in it, but anytime she thought you was gonna catch a cold, you would be taking a spoonful of that stuff like every day. So Eric, welcome to the broadcast, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. All right.
You want to bring in some of our guests?
Yes, ma'am. I'm excited for what this broadcast has in store. So we have with us today two other agricultural influencers in the state of Georgia and beyond. I'm going to start with Brother Tanisio Cianima. He's a urban ag specialist in the Atlanta, Georgia area. Fairly newly appointed director of East Point's Urban Ag Program. I'm going to let him introduce himself more formally. And then I also brought a veteran, somebody who's been on these political and agricultural, we say streets, young people, dirt roads in his case, because he's rural down here, not too far from me, out of Buena Vista, Georgia. What county is that? Chattahoochee County.
Marion County.
Marion County. Thanks. I knew it was one of them. Brother Eddie Slaughter. Those of you all that know about the Pickford lawsuit and some of those old battles, you probably know Brother Eddie Slaughter. So, Tanisio, introduce yourself, and then of course and then I'll let you, Mr. Slaughter, and then we'll pitch to you, and then we'll get the conversation rolling.
All right. Well, thank you. Greetings, everyone. Appreciate you all having me on the program today. And yes, as you stated, Eric, I am an urban farmer. My name is Tanisio Cianima. My farm is Nature's Candy Farms, which was originally started in East Point, Georgia in 2011. We'll say I chopped my teeth from working for some other urban farms in the area, such as Truly Living Well. I've worked with Habesha, but I also am a part of a generation of agrarians. My family has owned land since 1882. So we were granted the title of Centurion landowners in 1982. That land still is in the family. And so it's always been a drive of mine to make sure that I represent the value that they placed on that land in the works that I do here in the Metro Atlanta area. And so that led me to becoming a part of a city agricultural planning committee in 2019 that eventually voted to make me the manager of urban agriculture for that municipality. It's been an exciting journey so far, and I'm definitely looking forward to, even politicizing that role in a way in which it ties into some of the other, factors, if you will, that affect our well-being in this country. So thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, brother. And Mr. Slaughter, you heard Tanisio mention his family's history in farming, and you're on a generational farm as well. I mean, you're on a generational farm as well. So if you would tell us about your journey into farming, and where that has led you up to this point.
Well, I was born here in Villa Vista, Georgia, raised up in Miami, Florida, but I always knew I was coming back to the land. Every summer, my daddy made sure anybody coming to Villa Vista, boy, hey, I got a son, I need for you to take that way. And God blessed me that I was able to buy my grandfather's farm that's been in the generation, about 4 generations, and my aunt and farm has been in the family for 5 generations, respectively. Traditional agriculture, I have grown peanuts and cotton and soybeans and corns and all of that over the years. I've been a part of the Pickford lawsuit ever since April the 14th, 1999, when we became a class action lawsuit. One of the most disastrous things that ever happened to us as a people in this country. You think that the justice system going to court, when they talk about racism, this is one instrument that they use. Judge Paul L. Freeman in Washington, D.C. has been over the Pickford lawsuit, and not one case, out of 40-some thousand farmers, not one case has been able to be heard in his court on the merits of what happened. And even though that they admitted to the discrimination and what have you, and we had a consent decree saying that that if you prevail, you got $50,000, and you got your land, you discharge all the debt against your land. Unfortunately, we argued back in those days that $50,000 was not enough to cover the damages that we had lost from the discrimination. But the lawyers tried to quiet everybody down while we was going through these rocky periods. Said, but you're gonna get your land back. You all gonna get your land back. So we thought about, okay, if they're gonna return to us 1.5 million acres of land, I don't care if they don't pay me my damages. I just want to get out from under USDA. And unfortunately, that never happened. 3 times this had been attempted, and it has never happened. Even this last time, I think Steve Harvey on his show last week was talking about how the Biden administration had gave $4 billion to Black farmers. This is an absolute lie. That has not happened. That has not happened. Tom Vilsack, the Secretary of Agriculture, we commonly called him the Grand Wizard because we all opposed him going back there. He had been there 8 years under the Obama administration. And I mean, he has been disastrous for Black farmers. Yep. And this time with the Biden administration putting him back there, and when the Senate signed the bill to discharge the debt of Black farmers, pay all of, get it out the way, get it off the books. Then the Congress signed it, approved it, and the President Joe Biden signed it into law. And they drug around for about over 90 days until white farmers filed a lawsuit for reverse discrimination. So even though everybody thought we got that $4 billion, that's not the truth. Yeah. We ain't got none of this. It's been frozen by a judge in Florida and also one in Wisconsin. So yes, sir. This has been 22 years we've been fighting this, and we have never received the justice that was due us. All right,
Mr. Slaughter, thanks. And Will, you take us into really kind of the framework that we want to work within in this conversation. Reparations. As we know, Tamara Johnson Sheila is a candidate for U.S. Senate. Ran in the special election, this last special election, did real well, and now she's gearing up again. And I've been one of these people. I've always said that agriculture was ground zero for reparations because the debt was in our unpaid farm labor for the most part, ag labor, land that was taken. And so some people had even made the comment years ago that the Pigford settlement was kind of the closest thing we've had to reparations. And as you were just articulating, it didn't turn out well, and there's still a lot of work to be done there. So as we look at the whole issue of reparations and how it pertains to farming and food and land ownership, Brother Tenicio, from an urban ag perspective, but from just a larger farmer perspective, what role does food and farming play in our address in the larger context of reparations? How should that be factored into a remedy, or are these proposals that Mr. Slaughter was speaking about that the Biden administration is trying to offer us, or do they go far enough? Your thoughts on those?
Before you jump in right there, Tenicio, Eric, can you give some clarification, or can somebody give some clarification specifically of what Pigford is? Because I think there's so many people that don't quite know the history of this legislation. Just for some context before he answers that question.
And if we can do this, I was going to let him touch on that. Before I go back to Slaughter, I'm going to frame it and then let Slaughter give a little bit more clarification, because he's actually been in that fight.
Okay. Well, yeah, no, I definitely would say the short answer is no. There definitely hasn't been enough work done. I'll just address a few points that I think, could be a part of, a package, if you will, to support us. Number one, I think the programs that exist within the USDA that quote unquote Black farmers have access to need to definitely be optimized. A prime example of one, and I'm reading straight from some notes I've taken here, is number one, allow the historically underserved farmers and ranchers participating in the EQIP program, right? Many of us farmers know that as the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. I feel that there needs to be an opportunity for farmers to automatically receive advanced payment options. Again, I'm using a lot of farming language, so I hope you all can keep up, but whenever those of us want to farm, utilize USDA programs, many of those programs have what's known as a cost share. Those cost shares are reimbursement for costs that you take on, and thus the USDA is saying, hey, we're sharing the cost with you. Well, just like many things in life, you got to put up before you get back. And so many of these programs that they will share the cost with you require you to take on some exorbitant costs up front that some farmers can't afford to receive. What many farmers don't know, though, is that the USDA actually has the option to give you portions of that money up front if they choose to. I'm gonna let that hang a little bit. So, the question is if they choose to. And I think that there should definitely be some more focus on making sure that some of those upfront costs are given to farmers based upon the conditions that we've been under. And again, there's more details to a lot of this stuff, so I'm really cruising through it quick. Another thing I would say is the Socially Disadvantaged Groups Grant, which is applicable to rural development. It provides robust funding for socially disadvantaged groups, but I think those grants need to be increased so that rural communities with low employment can basically have better opportunities to take advantage of some of the forthcoming trends, if you will, that happen relating to agriculture. Broadband expansion. Anybody who knows, start traveling outside of Atlanta and you're in Georgia. I always say you got Atlanta, then you got Georgia, and broadband is a huge issue. And we expect farmers to be able to keep up with the modern day trends. If they've got phones, tablets, computers, they can't tap into the network where those webinars are that Vilsack will be sitting at talking about all these programs, but they can't even get on the webinar. Well, how would they know to even take advantage of some of these opportunities that the USDA is offering? And that's just, again, one example. Another big one is, I think, in a reparations package, we could focus on increasing formula funding. And what is that? So you have two different categories of schools. You got 1862s, you got 1890s. 1862s, for all practical purposes, are the white land grant schools. 1890s are the black land grant schools. And of course, you have 1994s for our Native American brothers and sisters. Well, there's what's known as formula funding that's given to these schools so that they can actually do some of the work that they do related to research. What many people don't know is that 1890s only get $140 million compared to $1 billion for the 1862s. So you have black schools that are getting basically more than 75% less funding to do the exact same research that these white schools are getting. And none of that is ever being discussed when it comes down to, some of the quote unquote inefficiencies of these black schools and being able to provide some of their extension services and other services to their general population. Well, if we were to, create some equity in the funding, maybe we'll see that those black schools aren't as purportedly inefficient as some may try to paint them out to be with regards to providing some of those services. And I'll just say this much: I can go down a long list, but it's clear that there's definitely already policies in place that the U.S. government is aware of that they could already just optimize. They don't even have to think up anything new. They can take some of the same programs that they already have in place and create a level of equity so that we can do what we need to do a lot better. Because I'm not one that's always for handouts. And this is clearly not me saying I'm against reparations. I'm just saying we are ready to do what we need to do if people get out of the way, right? And part of getting out of the way is give us what we deserve so we can just continue to do what we need to do. And right now we have situations in which oftentimes these categories of funding that I'm talking about, when people don't know better, they try and act as if, well, we gave you something and you didn't do with it what, we thought you could do. But then they're not saying how they're giving all of this extra support to, individuals and other ethnic groups, if you will. So I'll leave it there just so I don't filibuster the conversation. But I do have a pretty extensive list. And I think on a policy level, this is why I find my role in city government to be very important, is that if I can start at the smallest place where people are talking about these issues and hopefully expand it from there, I think then we may have a chance for success.
Yes. All right. Yeah. Thanks to Tanicio for that rundown. And of course, and just back to the Pickford lawsuit. You heard Tanicio mention, we kept hearing the term socially disadvantaged. And of course, we've heard minority. And for us that are reparationists, we know that those are terms that should mean ADOS, American descendant, especially when you're talking about farming and redress there. But of course, we know the political charge that saying black is, that's kind of like kryptonite. And so as far as the Pickford lawsuit, this was initiated back in the Clinton administration when Dan Glickman was ag secretary. And of course, there was a farmer by the name of Timothy Pickford who the suit was named after. But in essence, what happened was a lot of your organizations that were advocating for black farmers realized that, they were having farmers coming to them complaining, especially in the rural South, that they were getting denied loans, funds, that their white farmers were not, that they were being accepted for, kind of like in the housing industry, no different. But of course, but they were able to prove this through years of documentation, testimonies, applications. It was just some horror stories. And so basically that the lawsuit was filed. The lawsuit was upheld. It was probable cause. And of course, and then the settlements proceeded. And that's where Mr. Slaughter comes in. So Mr. Slaughter, if you would just, you probably remember back when it initiated under the Clinton and Glickman administration up until now. So if you can just give the audience some context in addition to in addition to the basics that I've shared, and you were one of those. You've long been a champion in that fight. I mean, you provided expert testimony in front of a lot of congressional panels, and so just educate our audience a little deeper from that farmer perspective, picking up where I left off and taking us forward to now. Turn.
Old field. And when we go into the courtroom, I feel that it's more like 1857 all over again with the Dred Scott decision. That we have no rights that white America is bound to respect. So when we went and won this lawsuit, what basically happened is that the lawyers made sure the biggest problem that we had, Democratic, Republican, black or white, did not want to see 1.5 million acres of land debt-free returned to black farmers across this country, especially across the historical South. So what they did, they came up with a bunch of things, and we end up fighting the Justice Department, the United States Department of Agriculture. We end up fighting a whole bunch of people in a bunch of places because nobody really wanted to see, and we don't call it reparation, we call it just compensation for the injustices, the discrimination, and that we suffered at this very moment, that we are living through it and doing it, So what happened was that the lawyers changed the wording in the consent decree. This was what was supposed to govern this. And instead of saying black farmers, they got to saying claimants. And so what happened was the first $631 million that they paid out in $50,000 settlements, 92% of everybody that got the $50,000 did not have a farm ID number or any kind of documentation that shows that they did business with USDA. So they paid out all of this money, and they knew that even at the time it was over USDA Office of General Counsel, or J. Michael Kelly, said 92% of these people did not even farm. And so my argument and our argument was, y'all paid them. We didn't approve of y'all paying them. Y'all knew every farmer, every black farmer you have in this country. And y'all decided to pay that money to claimants. And what claimants did say, if you attempted to farm or you was an heir of a farmer, and this was to get rid of the money to look like you're paying farmers. So the ones that said, well, you got all these farmers complaining. They said, oh, those are the ones that don't have a case. But in fact, these are the ones that did have a case. So what they did as it came out, when it finally found out that it wasn't going anywhere, and they did not one black farmer received justice out of Pickford. Not one in this whole continental United States received justice out of the Pickford lawsuit. So when we go to court, it's just a business as usual with them. George Paul L. Freeman, if he had been a Republican instead of a Democrat, they would have called him out a racist for not hearing none of these cases and dealt with it. Same thing with Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack. The stuff that he did back under the Obama administration, he was Secretary of Agriculture. But let's don't criticize me, gonna make the black president look bad and all this stuff. I said, hold it. The truth need to be told. So, there was a case called Eddie and Dorothy Wise, where he had armed militias. Looked like they were just military troops. They came in there dressed in black, and they evicted them from the farm. They couldn't get nothing but the clothes on their back. They couldn't even take a toothbrush out of it. This is the same Tom Vilsack, that's Secretary of Agriculture now. And the reason we call him the Grand Wizard, because he went to federal court and tried to get all these cases thrown out because they had drug him out for 2 years. For 2 years, they drug him out. The statute of limitations is 2 years. They don't go and investigate your case. They don't do nothing with it. Just let the time run out, then they just throw it out. And so as we got to complaining about it, and it had such a backlog of cases that it was just unbelievable. And they would have not allowed any of these cases to go to court on the merit. Not one case. Tell me, where's America and all the social justice and all this stuff going when not one case was heard by George Paul L. Freeman? But if he was a Republican, they'd have drug him through the mud and called him a racist. How could you? And anytime you try to get out from under this particular judge in Washington, D.C., Paul Freeman, I filed in Columbus, Georgia, near me in the district I was in. And they have something they call subject matter jurisdiction. The only person could hear the case was Judge Paul Freeman. So they couldn't hear the case. They referred it back to him. Same thing happened in Florida with the farmers. Oklahoma, Arkansas, all over the place. You could not get this Pickford case heard because subject matter jurisdiction always referred it back to Judge Paul L. Freeman in Washington, D.C. And this guy here, he has not heard any cases. He has not heard not one case. And not one black farmer receives justice. They call yourself prevailing. And this was more like economic terrorism, because what they did, I got $50,000. That's when the terrorism began. Because when I got the $50,000 and they didn't give me debt relief for my farms, then they start offsetting my Social Security disability check. All of my income tax return, they'll take it and put it against this. They will get all of your subsidy payments and all of these, any way that you got, even when when President George Bush sent out the $250 stimulus package, sent me a letter, it's going against this. Then after we was having such an unbelievable time economically fighting this lawsuit, we went and started trying to figure out, okay, how much is it paying down for us out of all these hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars that are being offsetted from black farmer Social Security, disability check, their railroad pension, that you'll take all our income tax return and everything, and none of it. All of that money, all those millions of dollars that they took from black farmers that's still taken to this day goes against the interest and not the principal. So it continued to grow. In the case of, I think, Ms. Dorothy Todd, they was paying $25,000 a year. $5,000 went toward the principal, $20,000 went toward the interest. So that means that the interest is outgrowing the principal every year they pay. This is how bad this system is and how corrupt it is. And most black farmers are 70, 80, and 90 years of age. We got so many black farmers in their 80s and 90s that's tied up in this here, you know, it's going nowhere. And I mean, the injustice is something that you wouldn't believe that's happening in America at this time right now.
Wow. Okay. Thanks, Mr. Slaughter, for that context. Tamara, anything you want to jump in here and say after hearing that?
I'm speechless, Eric. I was holding my head like, wait.
I hope somewhere out there somebody here that says it's a lie and go and try to prove that it's a lie. That's what I would love. Try to prove this is a lie because nobody believes it. And the news media definitely don't even touch it or cover it. Yeah.
How do we get our farmers to not be trapped in these systems? What is the answer to that?
And that's what I'm glad that you pitched that, because I'm a part of West Georgia Farmers Cooperatives. Mr. Slaughter is both of these guys actually a part of our co-op, and of course, glad both of them. Well, you know my position as far as within the context of reparations. I've always believed there's only two solutions for Black people economically in this country, as far as economic ownership, economic power. That's obviously reparations is the ultimate repay, because it will infuse the capital that we need to really participate in America adequately. And then the other option we have is cooperative economics. That's why we champion cooperative economics so passionately. But there's a concept that we're fiercely starting to champion now. West Georgia kind of being a leader in that concept. There are other groups out here doing the same thing, and Tanisio can speak on this. Sovereign food systems. So Tanisio, talk to our audience about sovereign food systems and what they look like for us in empowered Black America. That includes our farmers and all of those that make up the food system, if you will.
Well, I'll say, at least, based upon what we envision in East Point, is just really closing the loop, on dependency on outside food as much as possible. So in East Point, let me just highlight a few things that we already have in place that we're now systematically focusing on, wrapping a bow around. We actually have a food distributor that both purchases and sells within a 250-mile radius of its warehouse right there in East Point. We have an organization that actually acquires materials and produces compost right there within the city of East Point. We have a local farmers market that actually distributes food once a week, but we're also in the process of building out a cooperative grocery store that will develop opportunities for farmers and other food producers to market and sell their food 7 days throughout the week. We've also put policies in place to ensure that the legalities around farming within the city limits are not only fair to those who want to do so, but those who want to do so actually are aware of what these policies are, because in some cities it's known to be unlawful to farm, meaning it's not illegal, but there's no laws to support it or go against it. So, policymakers can just go whichever way the wind blows, depending on if, let's say, a neighbor files a complaint. And so we're just trying to make sure that we tighten up, the proximity of where the activities related to food production, food manufacturing, food distribution, and consumption are, so that hyperlocal system is as tight-knit as possible. And again, that's why I say if we start small and we can grow from there, in the case of East Point, we communicate directly with the Urban Agricultural Department in Atlanta. I'm actually a resident of South Fulton, and so I'm talking with policymakers in South Fulton on how we can create some, city ag planning in that area. If I were to wait for the USDA or the county government to do that for me, I'd be waiting until the day I die. So we started at the smaller level and we're growing it from there. And so as Eric is stating, even from a cooperative to development position, that's the people taking charge. That's the people saying, look, we're going to create our own system, whether it be from food production, whether it be incentives for you to come and buy from us as growers, right? Even down to the point of, if we look at historically what our co-op had done, providing fuel, and support for growers. There's a lot of different components that fall within a system that I think if the people can just, rely on their own, willpower, desire, and strength, they can do a lot for themselves. They'd be shocked at how much they can get completed. And I'll just close with, in the case of East Point, I have to give thanks. I'd be remiss to not acknowledge the foresight of our mayor and city council for even being willing to take on this project, because when the idea was brought to them, some folks were saying, well, we don't want cows in backyards and cornfields in East Point. And we as the people had to say, well, that's not even what we're talking about first and foremost. Like, small scale agriculture in the city looks a lot different. And we were able to just nudge them through constant interaction to get them to finally see it. Now they're our biggest champion. But we needed those people in city government to really understand it first. And they took that time to learn from us. And so I want to thank them just, even in this program and having that foresight. But it started with the people in East Point first, and it's always going to start with the people.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for that. And basically, reparations, of course, as it pertains to food, from my perspective, not only does it require the federal government to infuse the long owed capital that will allow us to repair it, we can self-repair with that money, and we can create these systems, because my vision and what we're working on at West Georgia of a sovereign food system is from seed to seed. Mr. Slaughter and I were talking earlier about seeds, from the seed to the sale, from the seed all the way to the cash register, and all of the systems in between: processing, distribution, warehousing, trucking. That's the kind of sovereign food system that we need and we want and that we deserve. I know at West Georgia, we're in the process of building a credit union, a grocery store, and a commercial kitchen all on the same property. That's owned by the community, that's owned by us. We're probably in about 40% of the way complete. Now, Mr. Slaughter, back to you. I was really struck, and it was sobering to be reminded that most of our farmers are geriatric. They're just fortunate enough to be healthy enough to still try to go out there and work a little bit. And we know that Black farmers have two real issues to developing and to prosperity. And that's capital, and the other is labor. And labor is primarily due to age. The body does break down. Farming is hard work. And we know that that's probably systemic. They're expecting these people to not be around long enough to recoup any claims that may be owed to them. So, but there has been some efforts, and there are some efforts going on right now to try to clean up some of the shortcomings that Pickford was initially intended to address. Can you just bring us up to speed on what that's looking like now? Because I know you're one of the prominent voices in that effort. If you can just talk to us for about about 5 minutes about what's going on now, that some of the work that you and Tracy and those people are doing to bring it to clean it up.
Well, really, 3 times that we have went to get this resolved. That was in the Pickford lawsuit, and that was April the 14th of 1999, and it didn't happen. Then when Obama became president, he signed a $1.2 billion settlement to solve the problem with black farmers in this country. Unfortunately, the lawyers ran off with $1 billion. Not one farmer we know got anything out of that. And this time around, when the Senate passed the American Rescue Plan, they had in there people of color, and they had in there socially advantaged folks. This is always words that we see that they make sure that they dilute us and our strength. We can prove that the injustice that happened to us. I don't know no case where the Hispanics have proved that, what had happened to them, or the Asian folks, or the Pacific Islanders. But what has happened is time and time again, the justice system really don't work for us. And none of the truth has actually been told about this. And the Inspector General has investigated USDA and found out that they did more fraud, more waste and abuse of all of that money instead of them being able to do the things that should have been done to make it. The saddest part about it is black farmers now, they are debtor slaves. And the only way you get out of debt is to die out of it. That's the only way it's been happening. Let me give you an example of it. All of these farmers that started in Pickford back in 1999, for an example, Lucius Abrams lives over in Keysville, Georgia. They owed $500,000 to USDA. Because the interest is being compounded daily, 22 years later, they owe $1.6 million. Their debt has tripled in those 3 years. And the same thing with Carl Parker down here. Some of these are cases that I actually looked at, and they owed $400,000. Now they owe $1.5 million. So all of us. Matter of fact, I got my debt relief for my farms back in 2018. And that's when Sonny Perdue was the Secretary of Agriculture. And because I know him, but he did look into my case and saw that there was more interest I owed than I actually owed for the principal debt that came out. And so they gave it to me, and they wanted to make me an example like what they've done. You gave one black person justice, and you think we ought to be up in arms and hurraying about it. You want me to, give you this big old parade and you doing the right thing, then do the whole 17,000 black farmers, return to all of us, all of our land, And the saddest thing about it is that right now we got 57 black members in Congress. We have the Congressional Black Caucus is there, and they are shaking in their boots because that we may have to ask them, because really, if justice is going to be served for black farmers right now, they need to go back to 1999 and get rid of all the interest. Because what they did by this interest being compounded daily, that means that everybody that had equity in your farm, if your farm was worth $2 million, after 22 years of interest compounded daily, guess what? The interest had ate up all the equity. So you can't go nowhere to refinance or do anything. This with all the farmers, with all the black farmers, that they have allowed the interest to run wild on us. And now we owe 2 to 3 times as much as what the original interest was in 1999. But the Congressional Black Caucus, if they would unite together and demand that they knock all that interest off, because we should have received justice then a lot of us can really leave and go to other banks and private banks, because you would have enough equity in it that you could go and do it and leave USDA. It's just like you're on a slave plantation. There's no way to escape. And this is really what's the problem with it. This is a moral disgrace. And right now, as they going through all this here, when they drug it out, I think when President Donald Trump got in trouble with the soybean farmers because the trade war with China, and so China stopped buying all the soybeans. But he went and got $46 billion, put it in the Commodity Credit Corporation, and in 3 to 7 days, all of those farmers had that money. Mm. But when it comes to us, for us to receive our justice, they create a whole different process. And by the time that Tom Vilsack gonna send out the letters to everybody, now the white farmers 90 days later, when they should have had been able to pay us in the first 30 days and had our deeds returned to us.
Yes.
You know,
so that's
this kind of injustice. We're fighting the Justice Department. Justice Department spent over $15 million fighting us so that we couldn't win. I mean, and a whole bunch of things. So, we're going through this, and I don't think that it's just with black farmers. I think that farmers, blacks out there that's fighting for education for our children, they're going up against the same problem. Same thing in the housing industry. Anywhere that you look at that we are fighting for justice in this country, the news media never covers it, and it's shameful. It's downright shameful, some of the injustices that we're suffering in these different areas as black folks in America.
Thanks, Brother Slaughter. Yeah, thanks for that. And as you were just talking about the failings of the Pickford lawsuit and some of these subsequent efforts, it just takes me back to the Freedman's Bank issue. Of course, how that was one of those efforts where, that was supposed to be relief, but of course it was looted as well. And so, Tanisha, I know you only have a few minutes. You've got to go. I understand, and knowing the work that you do and that you've been doing for a few years, you spend a lot of time working in with nonprofit partners that deal with philanthrocapital. That's a new term that we're hearing now, philanthrocapital. It used to just be philanthropy now.
Okay, that's a new one to me.
Yeah, and so just tell me this: can philanthrocapital in any way sufficiently redress the issue that we know the federal government should redress with reparations, even though these organizations draw down some of these monies from the federal government?
Correct.
Get these agencies to try to work with black farmers. Just your thoughts on that, the potential or the shortcomings of philanthrocapital in trying to redress economic historical wrongs.
So I'm gonna answer it with the city government hat on, and then I'm gonna answer it with me as a farmer. What am I doing about it hat on? So I'd be remiss if I did not point out the fact that my position with the city of East Point is actually funded by the USDA. That's full transparency, right? So that's via a nonprofit that I've contracted with to do this work on behalf of that city, right? That's all I'm going to say on that. With regards to me as a farmer, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm moving away from the banking system as much as I possibly can and moving more into, independent financing. One of the conferences that I went to around 2016, there was actually 100% minus me, all white farmers, was a conference called Farming Without the Bank. And these farmers right now are creating their own systems where they're leveraging dividend paying whole life insurance policies to fund their farms. And they're literally creating trajectories for themselves to where they can say, okay, if we're financing our farm 100% by way of the banks this year, we're going to reduce that down to 90, down to 80. And by the time we get to year 10, we'll be 100% off the proverbial teat of a bank. That really stood out to me. And so I actually spoke with the facilitator of that conference and got more understanding about that system. And I actually implemented that system in my own farm as of earlier this year. And so why I bring that up to say is that I think it's a both and approach, right? You got to know how to really leverage the resources that are sitting out there that we can currently get quickly. But at the same time, all money ain't good money. And so finding ways to be able to divest from those systems while we're also simultaneously taking from them and just making the scales turn a little bit more. That's what I want to provide. Now, I know for a fact that the amount of funding that I need to run my business, my policy probably won't support that at this moment in time, and may not even get there until I die. And then that policy provides the proper funding to my children to take the farm to the next level. And thus it's that generational wealth mentality that I think we also need to be able to adopt, because even though I can proudly say, yeah, my family's had land since 1882, if I wanted to go onto that farm right now, there are no resources available for me except that land. And so needing, you know, that level of generational approach, I think is going to be very important as we move forward. And I'm just stating, at least for myself, that's the system that I'm using, is one in which I really begin to divest, because as you talked about, sovereignty is still a part of all of this. And, you know, I want to close with the fact that the reason why that conference was really emphasizing the importance of that system is the founder of that system actually got hit with a call for $800,000 in loans during the 80s farm crisis. The gentleman who created that system, his name is R. Nelson Nash, and he was a forester. And so when he got, you know, his loan called for $800,000, the epiphany hit him that, oh, I actually have that money sitting as cash value in one of my policies. So he paid his money back through to the government via that policy. And then he paid his policy back at a pace that was comfortable for him, where no one could dictate to him the terms of the amortization, excuse me. And so that put him in a position where he was able to take things at a pace that was comfortable for him, to where eventually when the man passed away, he had 49 different policies, right? So these are, again, the kind of out of the box thinking that I want to encourage, you know, those listeners who are paying attention to really begin to get creative and think about, because this is what some are doing in other communities, and it's not, you know, popular and mainstream right now. But I'm willing to bet you that as time goes on, you're going to find that some of those other farmers, as Reverend Slaughter mentioned, you know, who have their own issues, but they may not be as extreme as ours. They're figuring out ways to solve this without the government as well, too. You're quiet, Eric. We can't hear you.
I want to say just thank you for coming through and dropping those jewels. And I know you've got to go. And it's great to have you as part of these conversations. And so, Reverend Slaughter, I want to kick it back to you. As Tanisio was talking about generational wealth and passing down land and resources, earlier you were sharing with us before the broadcast the latest, the recent activity of the federal government as far as it pertains to air property and land laws. And of course, in the Biden's administration's just the other day to I think put some funds toward those efforts. Just share with us what air property is, and of course, and how that, and if that can, you know, of course, is that a remedy for us as landowners and farmers?
Then all of that 100 acres or what have you belongs to those children. And very few times that you can find that all 7 or 12 can get together and agree that we want to do this with the property, we want to sell the property, we want to work the farm. And so you have all these fractions. So you don't never really solve it up. The most way they solve it up is that when whites want the land, especially if there's water on the land, they find out that there is different resources on the land. Then what they do, they come in such a way to, excuse me, I dropped, I guess I got it back somewhere. All right, okay, maybe I got it. But anyway, so much for being on the other side of 70 with this technology of today. And what happens is that they can find one of them that's an alcoholic or a drug addict and say, hey, yeah, I loan you, you know, $1,200, $1,000. You know, once you lend him that money, then he actually, that heir, he's going to go after that heir with his part of the property. 99% of the time, the judge is not going to allow it to go any other way but for y'all to sell the whole property and divide it up equally, and then the man can get paid and get his money. This is by design. So what they put into place it might affect maybe 1% of all black farmers in this country, because most of the time where we at now, all the air property issues are just about solved. Most of the air property issues are when you get these young folks that, hey, I don't want to be in the country. I don't want to be in here. I'm going to Detroit, Chicago, New York, and you leave your mother and father back here to deal with them. And as they get old and they pass away, a lot of times they don't pay the taxes. And, you got those kinds of things. But the whole thing in a nutshell is that air property issues can only be solved when the family can come together and agree, we're going to do this, we're going to sell it, we're going to farm it, here's what we're going to do. But what they put into place with those 501(c) organizations, they lending them up to $5 million at 1%. And they're going to lend it back to the farmers for whatever amount of interest that they're going to see in it. Me, myself, me personally, that's $67,000 to make it look like you're doing something for farmers when you really ain't doing nothing. Yeah.
Air property issues have historically been a tool that's really accelerated our land loss over the years for those real reasons. And of course, and like you mentioned, of course, due to a lot of the work of organizations like the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, who are pretty much going to be beneficiaries of some of this work to continue to do that work. But not all landowners are farmers. And I think that's what we got out of your synopsis of that benefit yesterday. Not all landowners are farmers. So, but anyway, so just want to.
Well, just one other thing, Eric. Our people are not knowledgeable enough to understand you got that land there. If you got a couple of 100 acres and it done grew for the last 20, 30 years, you got hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of timber. There are other issues, like you may have resources, just like with Harry Young. He had oil under his land. And they found out it's $750 million worth of coal and oil reserves there. So a lot of times, our people. Hello?
We're here.
All right. I don't know what happened, but okay. But anyway, there are so many different resources that they have on the land that they're not aware of. Some of them may have, water where you can actually get this running water and find out that you can just about distill your own water or bottle your own water and put it in. There are so many resources available.
Yes.
You may have 40 acres worth of pecan trees out there. You might have to go out there and clean up the whole orchard and everything and get it back in production, and you can start bringing in $30,000 or $40,000. There's so much that we are missing as a people when we don't realize that the resources that you have, because there's all kind of minerals, there are all kind of resources in the land. It's not just the land, and I see it as a bunch of trees growing up, and there's nothing but a forest and a wilderness. If you look at, you look at what anything in New York City at one time, it was, it was forest. It was grown out there. Somebody had to go ahead on and clean it up and make it. So our people need to be aware that go and find out, have an agronomist to come out there and look and see what you got on your land. What can you use? What kind of resource that you got up under the soil that you don't see? There's a tremendous. Right now they're going around here, whatever this chalk stuff is, they call it kale or something.
Kaolin.
White chalk. Man, they are paying over arm and leg, cutting up people's property and digging it out. And I think I don't know what they do with it, but it's very expensive, and they extract it over in Macon County here like unbelievable. Yes. I know my daddy back in the days, back in I guess about 55, 56, he sold $2,000 worth of iron ore. Back there, that $2,000 was some really good money back in 55. And so there's a lot of minerals that we have on these lands that we have no idea about, or conscious about the value of them,
Right. And I'm glad that you brought up education, because one of the outcomes of the previous Pickford lawsuit was to connect Black farmers to these federal resources, because as you mentioned, there wasn't a lot of information on what these agencies actually could help farmers and landowners do to maximize their holdings. And so you had a lot of our 501c3 organizations who's been working in the last 30 years to specifically connect farmers with agencies like NRCS, with FSA, federal. That's where the loans come from, typically FSA. Right. And so the education piece was one of the, I guess if there was anything that came out of that Pickford lawsuit, other than the hard financial cash that was due to us, was some of the educational outreach. And that just goes to show the value of land. And I really appreciate you for emphasizing that, the value of land. And that from 1910 to now, of course, there's been a drastic decrease in landship in America. And you can see that was pretty much by design, for the simple reason there was a lot of value. So thank you for joining me. And thank you, Tamara, for having us. So I'll leave these last 2 or 3 minutes for you and your other guests here to ask us or say or comment any way that you all feel appropriate.
Hey, Robbie, welcome to the broadcast. This was all that I knew it would be. I think there's such a disconnect between the food that we're eating and the farming, the industry itself, and all that it takes for us to have what we need. So I wanted to bring this to the broadcast today and really connect the dots, and specifically with our Black farmers here in Georgia who are just, I see this web. It's like they're trapped in this system, and it's this web, and they cannot, I'm like, how do you get out of this? How do we get out of it? And that's what I wanted to hear today. And I'm going to follow back up with you, Mr. Slaughter, and of course you and Eric. Eric and I, we talk all the time. So I'll be following back up, because we have to relieve farmers, because even with reparations, I don't want to see that go towards the debt that is owed. So we need to relieve our Black farmers on the forefront. So I'm definitely going to follow back up with you and continue this discussion. Robbie, you want to jump in?
I just appreciate the information and education, and it's unfortunate. I'm in Atlanta. I'm in kind of ground zero for gentrification, and in food deserts, very near to East Point, and the food that lower income people have access to is so unnutritious. Just what I see are kids like walking around, our water boys, and constantly going to the convenience stores, just buying not natural products. And we're wondering, where these behavioral issues are coming from. And we're wondering where our elders are getting sick, and it's the food. And then you combine that with water, and the problems with our water system and fluoride, and combine that with vaccine. And all I can say is thank you for your efforts, to try to make things better, to be transparent about it, to create, some type of coalition to aid you. And, I'm just here to support. I don't know where, it's kind of a little late in the broadcast, so I apologize. I don't know where like Latin farm workers come in this. I see a lot of videos with Latin farm workers, and it just seems like they're being exploited as well, and kind of pitted against Black farmers to, get out of paying legitimate wages to some degree. What I see in construction just seems like the same MO and the same problematic systems, and the same people who are normally non-people of color capitalizing on monies that should be going direct to the people working. And I don't really, it's heartbreaking, and my hat's off to you. I don't know what else to say about it.
Thank you.
And this is the work that we're going to continue to do, Robbie. Where, when we don't know, this is why we go to those who are, this is their experience, and we need to figure it out and work it out and work together. I do believe that food is medicine. We gotta get it right. We gotta get it right, and we gotta get it right specifically with our Black farmers. So Eric and Mr. Slaughter, I want to thank you for joining us on this broadcast. we will definitely have you back, because I want to follow back up and continue to have these kind of conversations. Like I say, growing up, that's all I knew. And it's watch you eat that fig, Eric. I'm so jealous. Like, that's all we knew. You go outside and you eat what is growing in the yard, and you eat off the land. And that doesn't exist today. And we got to make sure that we bring that back. And that is rooted with our Black farmers. Mr. Slaughter, thank you for joining us, sir.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Oh, I wanted to ask you, can I get a copy of this once we finish with it and what have you?
Oh, absolutely. This will be everywhere. Watch.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
And I'll make sure you definitely get the link to the broadcast. Absolutely.
All right.
All right. You can find Eric. Give a shout out to your co-op, please, before we head out.
Yes, West Georgia Farmers Cooperative. Check us out. Facebook, West Georgia Farmers Cooperative. Website, westgeorgiafarmerscoop.com. Co-op like coop.com.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to continue to follow. You can always find Ms. Robbie Caban at robbiecaban.com. Every week we give voice to issues, activists, and activism. Please support this broadcast. You can go to tamarasheely.com. We work a lot alongside churches fighting for reparations. So if you are looking for a church home that is serious about this fight, or if you're a church and you are serious about this fight, please join us in support of Reparations Sunday. That's reparationsunday.com. If you are a descendant of chattel slavery in Georgia, there's a House Bill, HB 541, in the Georgia legislature right here, right now, that will address the impact of slavery on those of us who are descendants of chattel slavery and remedy it. Let's talk about these remedies that need to happen. And the Black farmers, you definitely have a huge voice in this bill. HB541.net. And I am, everybody, Tamara Johnson Sheely. Help us win our race to the United States Senate. You can donate, you can volunteer, be a part of this campaign. That's tamara4georgia.com. And I will see you back. We will see you back next week, next Saturday, 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Mr. Slaughter. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning in to Tamara for Georgia, where we give voice to issues, activists, and activism. I am Tamara Johnson Sheely, your candidate for the United States Senate. I'm a progressive Democrat that believes that reparations will make America great. It is time that we bridge the divide in this country. Please go to my website. That's www.tamara4georgia.com. Please join me every Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here